Well, a good morning to you once again, Desiree, coming to you live from Nasrec in Johannesburg. It is day 4 of the national conference as the ANC heads toward finalizing its leadership, its top 7, what we used to know as the top 6, now top 7 because they have added the role of second deputy secretary general to that list of the leadership of the party. We've got a list of nominations for those various positions. A lot of changes, though, that took place, particularly yesterday, with regards to really how those nominations are looking. Some interesting changes as well as to how the delegates themselves are going to be voting for the leadership and how that compares to what they voted for when they left their branches in the first place. So we're going to be analyzing some of that data. Right now, just after 9 o'clock, there was an expectation that around this time the plenaries would have started already, but that has not yet happened. No surprises there over the past 4 days. Certainly a lot of delays in when the program does start. Eventually it always does get started, and it certainly has been an exciting elective conference, to say the least. But let's unpack it a little bit more with SABC News research editor Dr. Ronesh Dauraj. Dr. Ronesh, good morning to you. It's been a long 4 days. You're holding on strong?
Yeah, still surviving, and hopefully the conference will end on time as scheduled tomorrow.
Yeah, I think the research department at the SABC really having done so much work to just keep a close eye on the minutiae and the small details as they've happened. I think highlights for you from yesterday, the political day that was for the ANC. I think let's start firstly with the announcement by Pule Mabe and Mzwandile Masina. They came out as looking like a united front to make that press briefing.
Yeah. I think, when we saw that impromptu media briefing just before 6 o'clock around thereabouts, I think it was a failed political strategy on the side of Zwandile Masina and Pule Mabe, because remember the voting had started already around 3 o'clock yesterday. So whichever delegates, whichever provincial delegations might have voted already by then, those votes will not be counted in Pule Mabe's favor, because obviously Masina is out of the race now. He's assuming that those votes will automatically shift to Pule Mabe. No. Those are wasted votes, so-called spoiled ballots. So I think if there was an announcement to have been made, they could have done it a night before, and they could have informed the electoral committee to have probably struck Masina's name off the ballot, so people will not be confused. Never mind, you've got a phone and you're sending messages to people that, comrade, don't vote for so and so. Instead, give your vote to Pule Mabe. We stand a better something like that. But I think it was a little too late. So had they done it a day before, I think maybe Mabe could have added much more votes to his final vote tally.
Yeah, I think we're going to work. There's a lot more to talk about. It really is. And do stay with us, Dr. Dauraj, because we're going to unpack a little bit more. But let's hand over to our reporter Katlego, who's standing by with Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams.
Of course, Naledi, and to our viewers at home, we're coming to you on day 3 of the Progressive Business Forum. As breakfast, today we are hosted by a Small Business Development Minister, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. She just got off the podium, Naledi, after just more or less announcing an array of strategies that are underway in terms of intervention for small business development in the country. You know very well that there's been a lot of movement by the department in trying by all means to unlock the unbundle a whole lot of hurdles that businesses here at home have been experiencing. She's announced at least that they're also going to be tapping into stokvels to ensure that they bring him into the sector, informal businesses, to make sure that they bring them into the sector. She spoke about digitization in terms of more or less taking this to the township economy to ensure that no one is left behind. She spoke about the red tapes that exist in terms of ensuring or blocking businesses from progressing into the country. And you know very well that the economy is pivotal. The creation of jobs as well, very, very pivotal where this department is concerned. Firm commitments coming from the department in ensuring that no one is left behind. She has addressed a whole lot of business delegates that have gathered here at the ANC's 55th National Conference, just ensuring and telling them, letting them in on what her department has been doing to transform the small business sector and startups. You know very well that this is very, very very pivotal to the strengthening of the country's economy. I'm going to bring her into the conversation now. She'll just let us in and expand further on what she presented here today. Minister, thank you very much for joining us on the SABC. It was a lot that you actually delivered here, but just let us in on the gist of really the core of why we are here today and how important it is that we really transform and develop small businesses here in South Africa.
Thank you so much, and good morning to all the viewers in their respective areas. Well, the first thing, let me start by explaining what the National Development Plan said. And this is something not crafted by me, because I'm currently the serving Minister of Small Business Development. The National Development Plan dictates that by 2030, South Africa must create 11 million jobs. And out of that 11 million jobs, 90% of it should come from small businesses. And therefore, this tells you that there's a critical task that is the department we have. Because as things stand, for example, we have 3 to 3.5 million SMMEs in South Africa that are creating up to 8 million jobs. Now we have to double that number in order to make sure that the 11 million jobs can be created by 2030. Now, the first thing is, how do you create new SMMEs to come on board? How do you make sure that the ones that exist, because already they're excluded in the economy, many of them, government spends 1% from them, the private sector is not doing much, again, in terms of supporting small businesses, the markets are not accessible, there's lack of access to funding, and there's also the issues around business development support. And these are the areas we said the department must focus in order to make sure that we can really be able to say, how do we keep you going in business? Because it's not about the support that we provide today. It's about the support that when we provide support to you, then you are able to live longer and be able to contribute towards the sustainable growth that we're talking about. At the center of that is the development of legislations, or the reviewal of the legislations that we have. The Business Development Act was long developed, and it has really overstayed its stay wherever we are now in the current era. And this is why, as the department, we said, let us review that. Let's look at the issue of the payment permits, the payment of the permits that are required from municipal level. And in this context, we're engaging municipalities and SALGA to say, how do we find ways to make sure that our people can trade in the areas that are profitable, but also they can trade in a fair way that does not punish them by saying, we want so many rents that you must contribute. Because as much as we understand municipalities must make money, or they must have revenue, but it shouldn't be at the expense of killing the small businesses. The second element is the other red tape issues that I mentioned, the access to markets, the access to funding, and of course a conducive environment that I spoke about. This is why we're not only looking at the legislative environment, but also reviewing what exists in terms of the response or the compliance by the existing partners, be it big corporates or the small businesses. Because, for example, we created the BBBE Act, and we inserted a particular clause on ESD that must be adhered to. Very few corporates that are compliant to that. Ours is not to come and say you have failed and therefore do whatever, be punished, but ours is to say, how do we reshape for it to respond and address some of the challenges that we're talking about in relation to access to funds and access to markets. We continue to engage big businesses to unbundle their value and supply chains, but doing that requires us to have a tighter monitoring and a tighter collaboration with them. That is why next year we'll be launching our ESD partnership platform, wherein big businesses will be pledging the support in terms of the ESD contributions that they are paying. Of course, the BBBE Act dictates that at least they ought to spend 3% of their annual turnover, and this is where we are starting to get in. According to the reports that I got, it was like that 3% as things stand, we're looking at about 40 billion rand. Now I said there's no access, or there's limited access to funding. That's another money that is not fully utilized, and that's from the private sector. And from the state-owned entities, we're looking at about 10 billion rands again. That is not fully utilized. And if we join hands and be able to work in a coordinated manner, then we're able to deal with some of the challenges that we are looking at.
All right, Minister, thank you very much for your time. Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, the Minister of Small Business Development, coming through here at the PBF breakfast to just give us a sense of what her department has been doing in terms of interventions to help small businesses. Very, very important is the township economy economy that needs to be strengthened to ensure that it also fits into the country's economy that has been ailing over time. But the minister announcing interventions that are underway, and she also spoke about accountability, holding those people in power accountable, also talking about the cohort of the new leadership that is going to emerge out of this conference here, to say that this is going to be an ongoing process that will make sure that everyone or someone who comes into this portfolio that she's serving in right now will have an idea of the programs that are underway, so that businesses that are here can also ensure that they hold them accountable in strengthening and transforming the township sector, a small business sector, indeed very, very important to the country's economy. Naledi, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you, Katlego. That there, Katlego Legodi, bringing us the latest from the Progressive Business Forum that takes place on the sidelines, their breakfast rather, that takes place on the sidelines of the National Conference of the ANC. The 55th, it's day 4. We're back at Nasrec, and we continue our conversation with SABC News Research Editor, Mr. Ronesh Doraj, as we unpack really what happened yesterday, a very big day for the party, and certainly today a bigger one, as we expect the announcement of the top 7 of the party. So we talked a little bit to talk about Zweli Mkhize and Pule Mabe coming together and making that announcement, and you made the point that that announcement could have been made earlier if the votes that had been given to Zweli Mkhize are going to be counted for Pule Mabe. Do you think that they're aware of this?
I think they're probably aware of it, and if you take your mind back to the provincial nominations, I think Zweli Mkhize, I think his provincial nomination tally was 100 votes. So those 100 votes are basic wasted votes. There's nothing they can do. Like I said earlier, had they approached the electoral committee to say, strike my name off the roll, rather put, Pule Mabe, and I'll throw my support behind Mabe, then maybe something could have been done. Mkhize's name could have been left totally out of the ballot.
Right.
But now they are confusing people, regardless of the SMSs and the WhatsApp groups and all of that. It is a spoiled ballot. Right. It is a wasted vote. It won't count.
Okay, well, let's get into now some of the big factors yesterday that are going to influence what results we get today. And I think some of the drama where this is concerned may have started for a lot of us anyway on the outskirts of the conference, with that message that was sent out by Florence Radzilana, deputy chair of the ANC in Limpopo, saying, no, let's vote Zweli Mkhize. I mean, let's talk about what that looks like, right? What the province is actually saying in Limpopo, what that means for President Ramaphosa.
I think, Naledi, we have to appreciate the fact that this is a major national conference for the ANC. President Cyril Ramaphosa, the ANC president, in August 2020 called the previous conference in 2017 a seminal moment in the history of the ANC. In his political report on Friday, he referred to this conference as a watershed conference. So I think that is very telling in itself. Something major needs to happen at this conference. It is a very fluid situation, but if history has taught us anything, if you look at the provincial nominations versus the actual election results, if you'd indulge me, I can possibly reflect on that.
And I want to get there. I really want to get there, but I also just want to reflect before we start looking at those numbers, which some could call a betrayal to the branches, depending on what those numbers look like. I'm keen to hear what then happened with the Northwest.
Remember, to win election at this conference, you need the 3 big provinces behind your name. Which are the 3 provinces? It's KZN, obviously, close to 900 delegates, or 20% of the voting delegation. The second one is the Eastern Cape, and the third one is Limpopo. In September 2022, earlier this year, when the Motlanthe Committee, the Electoral Committee, released those provincial delegations, Limpopo and Eastern Cape had much more numbers, and Limpopo was brought down, I think, by 4%, and Eastern Cape by 1 or 2%. So their delegations, their delegate numbers have been decreased. Sorry. So it's very important also to remember that National Conference is not a conference of the regions, the ANC regions. Neither is it a conference of the provinces or the PECs, the provincial executive committees. 90% of delegates have to come from the branches. So by them doing what they're doing and making all those wild pronouncements that we saw yesterday, the Northwest, Gauteng, Limpopo, as you rightly said, You know what? End of the day, it comes to the branches. How the branches come here with the mandate. Obviously, we've heard allegations of vote buying,
Yes.
people being put up in hotels, money being exchanged in medical suites of all things, in buses and in the strangest of places. It also happened at the previous conference in 2017. We heard lots of stories behind that as well. But again, I go back to the point of national conference is indeed about the branches. It's not about the PECs.
Yeah.
It's not about the regional executive committees. It is about those branches.
So let's go through that data.
Yeah.
Because that is where the story is really telling about just how far these delegates here at Nasrec actually veer off from the mandate given to
Yeah.
them by the branches.
Yeah. So we must always look at history. History can teach us very, very important and very big lessons. If we can go back to the Nasrec conference, happened right at this venue in 2017. Let's look at the different positions, the 6 positions. Cyril Ramaphosa, when the PGCs voted, when the provincial nominations came in, he had 57% of support. But when delegates voted at this conference, his vote support actually was reduced to 51.82%. Then Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, the provinces gave her 42.68%. But at conference, something happened in between conference with the branch delegates, with the lobbying, with the whatever money exchanging hands. I'm not sure what happened. No one knows what happened because there's no tangible proof. Her vote share actually increased from 43% to 48%.
Sure.
So the difference is very close between Ramaphosa and Dr. Dlamini Zuma. The actual difference between their support was 179 votes. But I think the big one for me, if you look at the Secretary General, that was a very, very contentious one. Because you look at the 2 candidates, it was Ace Magashule and Senzo Mkunu. If you look at Senzo Mkunu, he actually garnered the most support from the provincial nominations. When the provinces voted, they gave him support of 61%. But when the actual vote happened at Nasrec, his vote was reduced down to 49.62%. Ace Magashule started very slow with the provinces, 39% support. But when the vote was finally tallied, he ended up with close to 50%, 49.81%. And the difference between Ace Magashule and Senzo Mkunu, believe it or not, was just 9 votes. 9 votes, and it was so embarrassing for Senzo Mkunu because he thought he had won. The people surrounding him at the venue at Nasrec actually started cheering him, and I think they put him on their shoulders. They took him to the stage, and then they realized, no, something's wrong here, something's amiss, and then Ace Magashule was declared the winner. So what I'm saying is, the provinces may have voted in one way. What happens between those provincial nominations, those so-called PGCs or provincial general councils, will reflect a totally different picture. All the intense campaigning happens at the venue, happens at national conference. So what I'm saying is, don't count your chickens before they hatch.
I mean, that's a clear message there.
Yeah.
Do not count your chickens before they hatch. And all these pronouncements and guesses that are being made on social media, very entertaining to watch. But really, we just have to wait until the African National Congress, in and of itself, decides who its leadership is and makes that announcement. Hopefully, that will happen today. Thank you so much to SABC News research editor, Mr. Ronesh Delraj there, Doctor, rather. Let's take a short break. More coverage throughout the day, so do stay with SABC News.